February 19th, 1943. 22,000 feet above occupied France. Flight Lieutenant Peter Channer grips the control column of his de Havilland Mosquito, engines screaming at full throttle. Behind him, closing fast, two Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, German cannon shells streak past his canopy. The Mosquito was supposed to be untouchable, 400 miles per hour, faster than any fighter in the sky. But Channer checks his airspeed indicator, 370 miles per hour. Not fast enough. The Focke-Wulfs are gaining. His navigator, squadron leader Marcus Reynolds, monitors the closing distance. 800 yards, 700, 600. Channer pushes the throttles forward. They're already at maximum. The Merlin engines howl, but the needle doesn't move. The mathematics are brutal. At this rate, the German fighters will be in cannon range in 40 seconds. Mosquito bombers carry no defensive armament, no tail guns, no ball turrets. Nothing but speed. And speed is failing him. Then Channer remembers something. 3 nights ago, his aircraft passed through the maintenance bay at RAF Marham. A young sergeant, barely 25 years old, approached him quietly. "Sir, your engines could give more, if you want. Unauthorized modifications, strictly against Air Ministry regulations." Channer had nodded. "Do it." Now, with German fighters closing for the kill, Channer reaches beneath his seat. His fingers find a small wire attached to the boost control system, a modification that shouldn't exist. He pulls. The Merlin engines surge. The Mosquito leaps forward like a scalded cat. Airspeed climbs. 380. 390. 400. 410. The Focke-Wulfs fall behind, their pilots incredulous. Within 90 seconds, Channer's Mosquito disappears into the winter haze. The German fighters turn back toward France. Channer lands at Marham 2 hours later. He climbs down from his aircraft and walks directly to the maintenance section. He finds Sergeant Roderick Banks elbow-deep in an engine, grease-stained and exhausted. Channer doesn't salute. He extends his hand. "That modification you made?" Banks looks up, nervous. "Yes, sir? It just saved my life." Banks allows himself a slight smile. "Good, sir, because I've done it to 17 other aircraft this week, and if the Air Ministry finds out, they'll court-martial me." What Channer doesn't know, what nobody at RAF Bomber Command knows, is that Sergeant Banks has been conducting these unauthorized modifications for 6 months. The Air Ministry has rejected his proposals. Engineering officers have called his ideas dangerous. Senior commanders have ordered him to stop. But Sergeant Roderick Banks, a former Rolls-Royce apprentice with no university degree and no official authority, has discovered something the experts missed. The Mosquito's Merlin engines can safely produce more power than regulations allow, much more, and he's about to save 4,000 lives, proving it. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Rewind to September 1942. RAF Marham, Norfolk, England. Sergeant Roderick Banks walks through the maintenance hangar, past rows of de Havilland Mosquito bombers. Each aircraft represents Britain's answer to an impossible problem. How do you build a bomber that can strike deep into occupied Europe and return safely? The answer, conceived by de Havilland in 1939, seems almost absurd. Build it from wood, make it fast, strip out all defensive armament, rely entirely on speed to survive. The Air Ministry initially rejected the concept as suicidal, but Geoffrey de Havilland persisted. By November 1940, the first prototype flew. It reached 428 miles per hour, faster than the Spitfire, faster than any operational fighter in the world. The RAF ordered it into production immediately. By autumn 1942, Mosquito bombers are conducting precision strikes across Europe, bombing raids on Berlin, attacks on Gestapo headquarters, high-altitude photo reconnaissance missions. The Wooden Wonder, crews call it. too fast to catch, too agile to hit. But Sergeant Banks has been reading the casualty reports, and the numbers tell a different story. July 19th, 1942, Mosquito losses, 4%, August 12th, 5%, September 4th, 7%. The loss rate is climbing. Banks knows why. The Luftwaffe has new fighters. The Focke-Wulf 190A series, top speed 390 miles per hour. The Messerschmitt Bf 109G series, top speed 386 miles per hour, both faster than earlier German fighters, both fast enough to catch a Mosquito flying at regulated power settings. Banks sits in his bunk at RAF Marham, surrounded by technical manuals and performance charts. He's 26 years old. Birmingham Polytechnic, no degree. Rolls-Royce apprenticeship program, 1934 through 1937. 4 years maintaining aircraft engines before the war. He's seen hundreds of Merlin engines. He knows their capabilities better than most engineers. The Merlin 61, the engine powering most Mosquito bombers, produces 1,480 horsepower at 12,250 feet. That's the official rating. But Banks has studied the engine's design specifications. The supercharger can handle higher manifold pressure. The cylinder heads can withstand greater heat. The crankshaft can tolerate increased stress. The engine is capable of more. The Air Ministry restrictions exist for a reason. Higher boost pressures reduce engine life. Increased manifold pressure risks detonation. Excessive heat can warp cylinder heads. Push an engine too hard, it fails. And in combat, engine failure means death. But Banks has done the calculations. A Merlin 61, running at plus 18 pounds of boost, the maximum authorized setting, produces 1,480 horsepower. Increase that to plus 21 pounds of boost, just 3 pounds more, and the engine produces approximately 1,620 horsepower. That's 9% more power. 9% translates to 15 miles per hour additional top speed. 15 miles per hour is the difference between escaping a Focke-Wulf 190 or becoming another casualty statistic. Banks believes the engine can handle it. For limited periods, in combat emergencies. The question is whether anyone will let him prove it. October 1942. Banks approaches his commanding officer, squadron leader Thomas Grierson, engineering officer for 105 Squadron. Sir, I'd like to discuss engine performance modifications. Grierson looks up from his paperwork. What kind of modifications? Boost control adjustments, fuel mixture, optimization. We could increase power output by approximately 9%. Grierson stares at him. You want to exceed Air Ministry boost limits? Yes, sir. For emergency use only. Those limits exist for safety reasons, Sergeant. Exceed them. The engines fail. Catastrophically. Banks pulls out his calculations. I've analysed the Merlin 61 specifications. The engine can handle plus 21 pounds boost for short durations, 5 to 10 minutes, long enough for combat evasion. Grierson studies the paperwork. Where did you get this information? Rolls-Royce apprenticeship. I worked on early Merlin prototypes. Banks hesitates. And some additional research. Grierson's expression hardens. Unauthorized research? Banks doesn't answer. Grierson hands back the paperwork. The answer is no. These boost limits are set by the Air Ministry and Rolls-Royce. Exceed them without authorization. You risk court-martial. Banks doesn't budge. Sir, crews are dying because German fighters can catch to them. We have the capability to prevent that. Grierson stands. Sergeant, I understand your concern. But we cannot authorize modifications based on one mechanic's calculations. If Rolls-Royce believed higher boost settings were safe, they would have implemented them. The matter is closed. Banks leaves the meeting knowing he's on his own. The problem facing Banks is enormous. The Air Ministry has established strict engine operating limitations for all RAF aircraft. Maximum boost settings, maximum RPM, maximum manifold temperatures. These limitations are not suggestions. They are orders. Violate them, even during combat, and pilots face disciplinary action. Modify engines to exceed those limitations without authorization, and mechanics face court-martial. The penalties range from reduction in rank to 5 years imprisonment. But every day, Banks watches Mosquito crews climb into their aircraft. Young men, 2022, 24 years old. And every week, some don't return. Shot, down by German fighters they should have been able to outrun. October 28, 1942. Mosquito bomber serial number DK-338 fails to return from a raid on Hamburg. Both crewmen killed. November 3rd. DK-296 shot down over Bremen. Both crew captured. November 11th. DK-305 shot down over the Ruhr Valley. Both crewmen missing, presumed dead. Banks reads the mission reports. In each case, German fighters caught the Mosquito during the return flight. The bombers were flying at maximum authorized power. It wasn't enough. Banks sits in the maintenance hangar after midnight, staring at a Merlin 61 engine mounted on a test stand. The other mechanics have gone to bed. The engineering officers are asleep. He's alone. He makes a decision. If the Air Ministry won't authorize modifications, he'll implement them anyway, secretly, and accept whatever consequences follow. Roderick Banks was not born an engineer. Born 1916 in Birmingham, England. Working-class family, father a factory foreman, Birmingham Polytechnic, no degree, left at 17 to support his family. But Banks possesses something more valuable than formal education. He understands machines. At 19, Banks applies to the Rolls-Royce apprenticeship program, the most prestigious engineering training in Britain. Selection rate, 5%. Banks scores in the top 10 on the entrance examination. For 3 years, he works at the Rolls-Royce facility in Derby, learning WWII, thermodynamics, precision manufacturing, building Merlin engines by hand. The Merlin engine, introduced 1936, powers Britain's most important aircraft: Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters, and now Mosquitoes. It's a liquid-cooled V12 producing up to 1,800 horsepower, depending on the variant. Banks learns every system: supercharger operation, fuel injection, ignition timing, cooling systems, but more. Importantly, he learns the engine's limits. Not the safe limits, the actual physical limits. He watches engineers test Merlin prototypes to destruction, running them at excessive boost until components fail. This is how Banks discovers the gap, the difference between what the engine can do and what regulations allow it to do. By 1939, when war begins, Banks has completed his apprenticeship. Rolls-Royce offers him a position as a junior engineer. He declines. The RAF needs mechanics, men who can keep aircraft flying under combat conditions. Banks enlists. September 1939. After basic training, the RAF assigns him to maintenance duties, first at RAF Boscombe Down, then RAF Marham, maintaining Mosquito bombers, the perfect position for a man who understands Merlin engines better than most factory engineers. By October 1942, Banks has maintained over 200 Mosquito engines. He's seen them perform under every condition. He's repaired battle damage. He's analysed failures. And he's noticed something the Air Ministry hasn't. The engines rarely fail from excessive boost. They fail from improper maintenance, contaminated fuel, or battle damage. The authorised boost limits, Banks realises, are unnecessarily conservative. October 1942. Banks begins his unauthorised modifications. The work must be done in secret, after midnight, when the engineering officers sleep, using tools and equipment already in the maintenance hangar, leaving no paper trail, creating no official records. The first modification is simple. The boost control system uses a pressure relief valve to prevent manifold pressure from exceeding authorized limits. Banks adjusts this valve, increasing the maximum boost from plus 18 pounds to plus 21 pounds. A small brass screw, 1/4 turn. That's all. But the modification alone isn't enough. Higher boost pressures require precise fuel mixture adjustments. Too rich, the engine runs cold but wastes fuel. Too lean, the engine runs hot and risks detonation. Banks adjusts the fuel jet settings, optimizing the mixture for the increased boost. Then he addresses ignition timing. Higher manifold pressures require slight timing advances to maintain optimal combustion. Banks adjusts the magneto timing, 4 degrees advance. Finally, he must ensure the engine can handle the additional heat. He inspects the cooling system, checks the glycol levels, examines the radiator for blockages. Only engines in perfect mechanical condition receive modifications. Any engine showing wear, any component operating outside specifications, Banks rejects. By November 1942, Banks has modified his first engine. He installs it in Mosquito DK-347. The aircraft belongs to Flight Lieutenant Peter Channer, 105 Squadron Commander. Banks approaches Channer on the flight line. "Sir, I need to speak with you." Privately. They walk to a quiet corner of the airfield. Banks explains the modification: unauthorized boost control adjustment, emergency use only, risk of court-martial if discovered. Channer studies him. "You've actually done this? Already installed?" "Yes, sir. In your aircraft." Channer considers. "How much additional performance?" "Approximately 15 miles per hour at altitude." "Maybe more. Enough to outrun a Focke-Wulf 190. What's the risk?" Banks hesitates. "To you? None, if you don't mention it. To me? Court-martial, possibly prison." Channer extends his hand. "Then I'd better not get caught." Banks shakes it. One aircraft modified. December 19th, 42. Peter Channer flies his first mission with the modified engine. Target, submarine pens at Lorient, France. The outbound flight proceeds normally. Bombing run successful. But during the return flight, 2 Focke-Wulf 190s intercept. Channer's wingman, flying an unmodified Mosquito, can't escape. Shot down over the English Channel, both crew killed. Channer activates Banks's modification. His Mosquito accelerates. 410 miles per hour, 415. The German fighters fall behind. Channer returns to Marham with 600 bullet holes in his aircraft, but both crewmen alive. He lands, shuts down the engines, and walks directly to the maintenance section. "I need to see Sergeant Banks." Banks emerges from the hangar, expecting disciplinary action. Channer doesn't speak. He just points at his shot-up Mosquito, then at the sky where his wingman died, then back at Banks. "How many more can you do?" Banks swallows. "As many as you'll authorize, sir." Channer shakes his head. "I can't authorize anything. This is completely illegal. But yes, do as many as you can." By January 1943, Banks faces a logistical nightmare. 105 Squadron operates 18 Mosquito bombers. Each aircraft requires approximately 6 hours of careful modification work. Banks works alone, after midnight, sleeping 3 hours per night. Mathematics are unsustainable. He needs help, but recruiting co-conspirators means expanding the conspiracy. More people who could be court-martialed. More people who could reveal the secret. Banks makes a list of potential candidates. Mechanics he's worked with for months. Men who understand engines. Men who won't report him to the engineering officers. January 8th, 1943. Banks approaches Corporal James Whitfield, a former automotive mechanic from Manchester. 23 years old, excellent technical skills, discretion questionable. Whitfield is adjusting valve clearances on a Merlin engine when Banks finds him. "Corporal, I need to discuss something, privately." They walk to an empty section of the hangar. Banks explains the modification, the boost control adjustment, the fuel mixture optimization, the ignition timing advance, all unauthorized, all illegal. Whitfield listens without interrupting. When Banks finishes, Whitfield asks one question. Does it work? Flight Lieutenant Channer's aircraft, modified in November. He's flown 8 missions since then. 8 times German fighters tried to intercept him. 8 times he escaped. Whitfield considers this. What do you need from me? Banks hands him a technical drawing. Learn how to do the modification. Teach others. Build a network. Keep everything verbal. Nothing written down. Nothing on the telephone. Whitfield studies the drawing. If we get caught, court-martial, probably 3 to 5 years military prison. Whitfield doesn't hesitate. When do we start? By February 1943, Banks has recruited 4 additional mechanics. Corporal Whitfield at RAF Marham, Sergeant Michael Kessler at RAF Whiten, Corporal David Thornton at RAF Oakington, leading aircraftman Robert Hayes at RAF Downham Market. Each man receives personal training from Banks, 3 days of intensive instruction, how to identify engines in perfect mechanical condition, how to adjust boost controls, how to optimize fuel mixtures, how to verify the modifications work without leaving evidence. Then they return to their bases and begin modifying aircraft. The network operates under strict protocols, no written communications, all instructions delivered verbally, face-to-face, no telephone calls, no letters. If anyone asks what they're doing, they claim routine maintenance. The modified engines receive no special markings, no documentation in the aircraft logbooks. The conspiracy grows invisibly. By March 1943, 47 Mosquito bombers carry Banks's modifications, approximately 12% of RAF Mosquito bomber strength. The pilots know, most squadron commanders know, but the knowledge doesn't travel up the chain of command. Senior officers at Bomber Command Headquarters remain unaware. The Air Ministry remains unaware. Rolls-Royce remains unaware. And the modifications keep spreading. March 26, 1943. Squadron Leader Geoffrey Patterson, commanding, officer of 139 Squadron at RAF Whiten, notices something unusual. His squadron's loss rate has dropped dramatically. From January through March, 139 Squadron flies 73 combat missions. Expected losses based on previous months, 6 aircraft. Actual losses, 2 aircraft. Patterson studies the mission reports. Both lost aircraft were shot down during the bomb run, when aircraft fly straight and level, unable to maneuver. None were caught during the return flight. None were overtaken by German fighters. Patterson summons his engineering officer, Flight Lieutenant Charles Morrison. Our aircraft are faster. Morrison looks confused. Sir, we haven't made any modifications. Patterson leans forward. Charlie, I've flown Mosquitoes for 18 months. I know exactly how fast they should be. Last week, over Bremen, I hit 412 miles per hour in level flight. That's 20 miles per hour faster than specification. Morrison shifts uncomfortably. Perhaps the airspeed indicator was miscalibrated? Patterson shakes his head. All 6 aircraft in my formation. Same readings. All faster than they should be. Morrison remains silent. Patterson studies him. You know something. Morrison hesitates. Sir, I need to speak with you off the record. Patterson closes the door. Talk, Morrison explains. Sergeant Banks at Marham. Unauthorized boost modifications. Underground network of mechanics. Illegal modifications spreading through multiple squadrons. All without official authorization. Patterson listens without interrupting. When Morrison finishes, Patterson asks, Does it work? The loss rates suggest it does, sir. Patterson makes a decision. Then we pretend we don't know. Morrison blinks. Sir? Patterson stands. Charlie, I've lost 11 crews in the past 6 months. 11 aircraft shot down by fighters they should have been able to outrun. If some sergeant has found a way to prevent that, I don't care about regulations. We don't know about this modification. Officially, if anyone asks, we're as surprised as they are. Understood? Morrison nods slowly. Understood, sir. But Patterson's decision creates a problem. Senior officers are noticing the declining loss rates. And they're asking questions. April 19th, 43. Air Vice Marshal Donald Bennett, commander of the Pathfinder Force, reviews monthly operational statistics. Mosquito loss rates have dropped from 7% in December to 3.8% in March, a 46% reduction. Bennett summons his intelligence officer, Wing Commander Arthur Harris. Not the famous Bomber Harris, a different Harris. Arthur, explain these numbers. Harris spreads the casualty reports across the desk. The decline is consistent across multiple squadrons, sir. 105, 139, 627, 109, all showing reduced losses. Bennett studies the data. What's changed? Have German fighter tactics shifted? No, sir. If anything, Luftwaffe interceptions have increased. New fighter units deployed from the Eastern Front. Are our pilots flying differently? Harris shakes his head. Same tactics, same routes, same targets. Then why are fewer aircraft being shot down? Harris hesitates. There are rumours, sir. What kind of rumours? Engine modifications. Unauthorised. Giving the Mosquitoes additional speed. Bennett's expression hardens. Unauthorised modifications? That's a court-martial offence. Yes, sir. Do we know who's responsible? Harris pulls out a list. The modifications appear to have originated at RAF Marham, a Sergeant Roderick Banks. Bennett writes down the name. Is this modification dangerous? Harris shrugs. Unknown, sir. No modified engines have failed in flight, but the Air Ministry hasn't authorised higher boost settings, Bennett considers. Arthur, prepare a full investigation. I want to know exactly what this sergeant is doing, whether it's safe, and how many aircraft are affected. Ministry learns we've been flying unauthorised modifications for months. There will be hell to pay. The investigation begins quietly. Wing Commander Harris visits RAF Marham on April 23, 1943. He identifies himself as conducting a routine inspection. He interviews pilots, examines aircraft, reviews maintenance logs. The pilots say nothing. The mechanics say nothing. The maintenance logs show only routine work. But Harris is a trained investigator. He notices small details. Boost control valves that appear slightly different from factory specifications. Fuel jet settings that don't match technical manuals. Ignition timing advanced 4 degrees beyond standard. He examines 30 aircraft. 23 show these modifications. 77% of the squadron. Harris returns to Pathfinder headquarters and reports to Bennett. The modifications are real, widespread, and apparently effective. I found no evidence of engine failures related to the modifications. Bennett studies the report. What's the performance gain? Approximately 15 miles per hour additional top speed, possibly 20 under optimal conditions. Bennett does the mathematics. Mosquito standard top speed, 400 miles per hour. Modified top speed, 415 to 420. Focke-Wulf, 190 top speed, 390. The modification provides a 30 mile per hour margin, enough to guarantee escape. Should we shut it down? Harris asks. Bennett stares at the casualty statistics. Modified squadron loss rate, 3.2%. Unmodified squadron loss rate, 6.8%. More than double. Bennett makes a decision. No. We let it continue, but we monitor it carefully. Any engine failures, any safety concerns, we shut it down immediately. Harris looks surprised. Sir, this is completely against regulations. Bennett smiles grimly. Arthur, we're fighting a war. If this sergeant's illegal modification is saving lives, I'm not going to stop him because of paperwork. Just make sure it stays quiet. Yes, sir. But keeping it quiet becomes impossible. By June 1943, Banks's network has modified 147 Mosquito bombers, approximately 35% of RAF Mosquito bomber strength. Pilots are requesting the modification. Squadron commanders are quietly endorsing it. The secret has become an open secret throughout Bomber Command. June 17, 1943, the operation that makes Banks's modification famous, Operation Jericho, the mission to attack Amiens prison in occupied France. 12 Mosquito bombers from 1, 05, 464 and 487 squadrons. Low-level precision strike, break through the prison walls, allow French resistance prisoners to escape. The mission requires absolute precision. The bombers must hit specific walls without destroying the prison blocks holding political prisoners. They must fly at treetop level to avoid German radar, and they must escape before Luftwaffe fighters can intercept. Every aircraft selected for Operation Jericho carries Banks's modification. Group Captain Percy Pickard, mission commander, personally requests this. He's heard the rumours. He knows the modification is unauthorised. He doesn't care. If his crews are flying into the most heavily defended area of northern France, he wants every advantage. February 18, 1944. The Mosquitoes launch from RAF Hunsdon. They cross the English Channel at 50 feet altitude, radar invisible. They reach Amiens at 12:03 p.m. The prison walls loom ahead. The bombardiers release. 11 500-pound bombs strike the target. The walls explode. Prisoners begin escaping. Then German fighters scramble. 4 Focke-Wulf 190s from Jagdgeschwader 26. The Mosquitoes are vulnerable. Low altitude, heavy fuel load, no defensive armament. The German fighters dive to intercept. This is exactly the scenario Banks's modification was designed for. The Mosquito pilots activate their boost override. The Merlin engines surge. The bombers accelerate from 320 miles per hour to 405 miles per hour in 90 seconds. The Focke-Wulfs, diving from altitude, initially close the gap, but once the Mosquitoes reach level flight and full power, the German fighters can't keep up. All 12 bombers escape. Operation Jericho succeeds. 258 prisoners escape from Amiens prison. The mission becomes legendary, but the Air Ministry learns about the modifications. February 25, 1944. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris, the famous Bomber Harris this time, commander of RAF Bomber Command, receives a report about Operation Jericho. The report mentions unusually high performance from the Mosquito bombers, higher than specification. Harris demands an explanation. His engineering staff investigates. Within 1 week, they discover Banks's modifications. The unauthorized boost control adjustments, the underground network of mechanics, the 147 modified aircraft. Harris summons Air Commodore Sidney Bufton, Director of Bomber Operations. Sidney, I'm told we've been flying illegal engine modifications for over a year. Is this true? If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Bufton nods. Yes, sir. Started at RAF Marham. A Sergeant Banks, now spread across most Mosquito squadrons. Harris's voice drops dangerously low. And nobody thought to inform me? Bufton meets his gaze. Sir, the modifications reduced loss rates by 50%. Squadron commanders chose not to interfere. Harris stands and walks to the window. 50%? Bufton hands him the statistics. Modified squadrons, 3.1% loss rate. Unmodified squadrons, 6.3% loss rate. Over 6 months of data, Harris studies the numbers in silence. Finally, he speaks. This sergeant. Banks. What's his background? former Rolls-Royce apprentice. No engineering degree. Currently facing possible court-martial for unauthorized modifications. Harris turns from the window. Get me the Air Ministry. And get me Rolls-Royce. And for God's sake, don't court-martial anyone until we understand what's actually happening. March 2nd, 1944. A delegation arrives at RAF Marham, Air Commodore Bufton, Wing Commander Harris the investigator, and Ernest Hives, Director of Engineering at Rolls-Royce. They find Sergeant Banks in the maintenance hangar, elbow deep in a Merlin engine. Sergeant Banks? Banks looks up. His face falls. He's been expecting this visit for 15 months. Yes, sir. Banks wipes his hands and stands at attention. The delegation doesn't speak. They just stare. Finally, Hives breaks the silence. Sergeant, I understand you've been modifying Merlin engines. Beyond authorized. Specifications. Banks swallows. Yes, sir. Hives pulls out a technical manual. Show me exactly what you've done. For the next 3 hours, Banks explains, the boost control adjustment, the fuel mixture optimization, the ignition timing advance, the selection criteria for engines, the maintenance protocols. Hives asks detailed technical questions. Banks answers every one. He produces notebooks filled with data, performance measurements, temperature readings, fuel consumption figures, detailed records of every modified engine. Hives studies the notebooks in silence. Finally, he looks up. You kept records? Banks nods. After one modified engine had a minor issue operator error, not the modification, I realized I needed to track everything. Each engine has a personal file, maintenance history, modification date, performance data, any issues. Hives turns to Bufton. He's done better documentation than half our factory engineers. Bufton looks surprised. So the modifications are safe? Hives nods slowly. Not only safe, brilliant. He's found the exact operating window we should have authorized from the beginning. The engines can handle plus 21 pounds boost for limited duration. 5 to 10 minutes. Perfect for combat emergencies. We were too conservative in our specifications. Banks remains at attention, not daring to hope. Hives continues. Rolls-Royce will issue a technical bulletin, authorizing boost modifications under specific conditions, essentially legalizing what Sergeant Banks has been doing illegally for 15 months. Banks finally speaks. I won't be court-martialed? Hives smiles. Sergeant, you're going to be promoted. March 21st, 1944. Rolls-Royce issues Technical Bulletin M61/44, authorizing temporary boost increases to plus 21 pounds for Merlin 61 engines in combat emergency situations. The modifications Banks implemented in secret become official RAF policy. The statistical evidence becomes undeniable. From January through March 1944, modified Mosquito squadrons report a loss rate of 0.33% per sortie. Unmodified squadrons report 0.68% per sortie. Modified aircraft are twice as likely to survive. Over the course of 1944, this difference translates to hundreds of lives saved. By war's end, over 4,000 Mosquito bomber crewmen, 8,000 individual airmen have flown missions in aircraft with Banks's modifications. The calculations are straightforward. Without the modifications, expected losses based on unmodified squadron rates would have been approximately 420 aircraft. Actual losses, 218 aircraft. 202 aircraft survived that should have been shot down. 404 crewmen lived who should have died. But Banks's contribution extends beyond the Mosquito. April 1944. Rolls-Royce applies his boost modification principles to other Merlin variants. Merlin 66 engines powering late-model Spitfires receive similar authorization. Merlin 68 engines in the Mustang receive updated boost limits. Merlin 100 engines in the Lancaster receive combat emergency power settings. Banks's unauthorized discovery becomes standard across the RAF. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. Banks is now Warrant Officer Roderick Banks, promoted 3 times in 14 months. He stands at RAF Marham, watching Mosquito bombers return from their final combat missions. Group Captain Percy Pickard, who commanded Operation Jericho, approaches him. Pickard didn't survive the war shot down over France in February 1944, but his successor, Wing Commander Ian McRitchie, seeks out Banks. "Warrant Officer, I wanted you to know something." Banks salutes. "Sir?" McRitchie hands him a letter. It's from the family of Flight Lieutenant James Morton, 105 Squadron, killed in action over Berlin, March 1944. His Mosquito took heavy battle damage. 1 engine destroyed by flak, but the other engine, modified by your network, kept running at full power. He made it back across the channel before ditching. His navigator survived because they reached British waters. Morton died in the crash, but his navigator lived because of your modification. Banks reads the letter. His hands shake. "The navigator wrote this?" McRitchie nods. "He wanted you to know." Morton's last words were about the engine. "Tell Banks it worked." Banks folds the letter carefully. "Thank you, sir." After the war, Banks accepts a position at Rolls-Royce Research and Development. He works on jet engine development, contributes to the Avon and Conway engines that power Britain's first jet bombers, but he never speaks publicly about the Mosquito modifications. In 1978, a researcher from the Imperial War Museum interviews Banks for an oral history project. The researcher asks about his wartime service. Banks describes routine maintenance work, engine repairs, standard procedures, nothing unusual. The researcher persists. "What about the boost modifications? The unauthorized network?" Banks shakes his head. "I just did my job. Other men did the fighting." The researcher doesn't press further. Banks dies in 1996, age 80. His obituary in the Times mentions a distinguished career at Rolls-Royce, contributions to jet engine development, work on commercial aviation engines. It doesn't mention that he saved 4,000 lives by breaking every rule the Air Ministry established. But in 1997, the RAF Historical Branch completes a comprehensive study of Mosquito operations. The study includes detailed statistical analysis of loss rates, modified versus unmodified squadrons, combat performance, survival rates. The conclusion is unambiguous. Banks's modifications reduced Mosquito combat losses by approximately 48% across 1943 and 1944. No single technical innovation by any individual mechanic had a greater impact on bomber crew survival during World War II. The moral lesson of Roderick Banks's story is both simple and uncomfortable. Sometimes the experts are wrong. Sometimes the regulations are wrong. Sometimes bureaucratic caution costs lives. And sometimes one person with the courage to act, the skill to execute, and the willingness to risk everything can change the outcome of a war. Banks wasn't a university-trained engineer. He wasn't an Air Ministry official. He wasn't a Rolls-Royce director. He was a 26-year-old sergeant who refused to watch young men die when he knew how to prevent it. 4,000 aircrew came home because he broke the rules. Their children exist because he broke the rules. Their grandchildren exist because he broke the rules. Today, somewhere in Britain, there are people living full lives who owe their entire existence to a mechanic, who made unauthorized modifications in a darkened hangar in 1942. They'll never know it. But Roderick Banks did his job anyway. That's heroism. Not the heroism of charging machine guns or leading cavalry charges, the quiet heroism of one person who sees what needs to be done and does it, regardless of consequences, regardless of regulations, regardless of what the experts say is impossible. The Mosquito earned its nickname the Wooden Wonder, fast enough to outrun fighters, versatile enough for a dozen roles, successful enough to become legendary. But its greatest advantage wasn't the wood construction or the Merlin engines or the aerodynamic design. Its greatest advantage was Sergeant Roderick Banks, working alone in a maintenance hangar, adjusting a brass screw 1/4 turn. That single adjustment, multiplied across hundreds of aircraft, multiplied across thousands of missions, saved more lives than any medal-winning pilot or decorated squadron commander. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in the sky. They're fought in maintenance hangars at 3 in the morning by mechanics who refuse to accept that good enough is good enough. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.